Sally Buckman with the Potomac Bead Company, and I have one of Anna's designs today that I'm going to do for you. I'm going to tweak it just a little bit to show you some of the new products and highlight those. This is the Silk Caterpillar. We call it that because it has silky beads on the top, and then it kind of has that caterpillar look that it bends back and forth and has that fun thing. So it's going to be using the silkies, and we're really highlighting those. I'm going to be using the Jet Iris Silky Bead. The silkies, if you're not familiar with them, they are a 2-hole diamond bead. They sit on the side in the diamond shape, so we'll be stringing them like this with their bump up going side to side. In addition to my silky beads, I'm going to be using some infinity beads. So the infinity beads are a 2-hole bead that looks like a figure 8 or an infinity sign, hence the name. And I'm using those in the pastel lilac color. The infinities I'm going to use in place of the half tielas. So you could use the half tielas like Anna did here in this Silk Caterpillar, or you can use the infinity beads like I'm doing here. I think it's going to kind of highlight and brighten up the sides a little bit. In addition to that, down the middle in between our silkies, we're going to run 2mm fire polished rounds, and these are the crystal copper rainbow color. And beside those, I'm going to have some 15-0s. I'm using the Crystal Labrador 15-0, which is a check coating on a Miyuki 15-0 product. And then I'm also using some 11-0s. And the 11-0s I'm using are the metallic light bronze in 11-0. And they're not going to be seen too much because they're going to be tucked down to the side. But they will be seen on the top here of the infinity beads when I add those. I have a cup button handy, and I'm using a light violet cup button. I also have 0.006 wildfire beading thread in green. I have my slip and snip cutters, so that way when I go to cut my thread, I can cut that. And it's kind of nice because I have little kids, so those are tucked inside and they can't get to them. I also have a Thread Zap 2 handy. You could use a Thread Zap 2 or a Thread Zap Ultra. That's going to singe down the ends as I'm working. And I have some super new glue. We are going to be working with 2 needles. You can work with 2 or 1. I'll describe how, but I'm going to be using size 10 needles. So we're working with size 10 and 2 of them. So we're going to kind of lay out and get ready to start our project. I'm going to move my tools to the side, and you're going to go ahead and cut 5 feet of beading thread, putting a needle on each end and getting ready with little piles of beads to work. We're going to be starting with our silky beads. We're going to be using the top here. So you don't have to get any infinities out. You don't have to get any 11-0s out. So just make piles of your 2mm, your 15, and your silky, as well as have your cup button ready and handy. We're going to be using that at the end of the top row. Just a little hint as I'm working with it, I was going to show you guys, you can take your scissors and actually cut right below the hole if you're buying things in bags, and that's going to open the bag so that way you can reseal them, because the 2mm beads are tiny and you're not necessarily going to use all of them in each project, so you can cut off the empty or cut off the top of our label like that and kind of pour those out. You could also use a 3mm bead in place here. That's up to you. But again, we're just making little piles of our product, and I'm going to cut some thread. So now that I have my beads laid out, I also have my 2 needles on my 5-foot piece of beading thread, so 1 on each end. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start the top of my Silk Caterpillar here. The top of the Silk Caterpillar is going to compose of 2mm fire polished rounds, my 15-0s, and my silky beads. I'm going to begin my pattern by putting on 6 of my 15-0 beads onto one of the needles. Doesn't matter right needle or left needle, just 6 of them. And I'm going to let those drop down to the very bottom of my beading thread. Once I have that there, I'm going to put on my silky bead. When you're looking at the silky bead, you are going to make sure that the silky bead is always facing up and that that little bump is going vertical horizontal rather than vertical. You want it right there going side to side, and my needles are going through the top of that silky. I'm going to pull that down to the bottom of my thread, and those 15-0s are just decorating the end of that silky bead. Once I'm coming out the top hole of the silky, I'm going to start my pattern, which is going to continue the whole length of my bracelet. It is going to be an 11-0, a 2 millimeter, or sorry, 15-0, a 2 millimeter, and a 15-0. I'm going to put that on the right needle, and I'm also going to put that on my left needle. So I'm going to have some on either side. I'm going to let that drop back to the end of my beading thread and get ready to add my next silky bead. Once I have those on, I'm going to separate those needles out. And when I put my next silky bead on, the one thing that I definitely want to make sure is that it's facing the same direction. So I'm going to pick up my next needle. This is my left-hand needle, and I'm going to make sure that it's on the left side so my bead is facing up. I'm then going to take my right needle and go through the other side. Once I'm through and pull it down, I'm going to continue on with my project, making sure those little bump ups sit at the top, adding just the 15-0 and the 2 millimeter round beads in that pattern. As I continue then, it's going to get longer and longer, and I'll actually have the whole top of my form. When I'm looking here at Anna's bracelet, she has right about 21 beads on the top, and this is going to be about a 7-inch wrist by the time we do the cut button. So you want to go about 21 at 20 if you have a smaller wrist, to about 23 long depending on your wrist size, adding all of these at the top. We are going to expand and add the clasp to the bottom, so don't think that that is the exact length of your bracelet. We still need to add our closures. So we're going to continue adding that same pattern whole way up 21 beads. So just to show you as I'm working with it, I have one side that I've put a bunch on, making sure that I went through the correct hole. And then I'm coming back and actually adding my second side in. That way I only have to hold one needle at a time. So this is kind of a shortcut. If you do want to do this with one needle, you're going to go up the whole side on one side, go around just like we did here, and come down the other side. So you can do it with one needle or two. I usually use two a lot just for beginners. Also, two needles kind of gives you more options. So whenever I start to play with beads, I usually do two needles just to get me started, especially with a lot of these 2-hole beads. But I'm just continuing up, adding those beads as I get them onto my needle. So I've gotten done putting on my 21 beads, and I'm going to show you how we're going to add our sides. So I have 6 of my 15-0s, which I'm going to use to decorate the side, just like I did at the start. And I'm also at this time going to lay out my pile of 11-0s, as well as my infinity beads. So I have those 2 piles out, and what I'm going to do is we're going to be adding the sides and then kind of seaming it up together. Again, you could use super duos, you can use the infinities, you can use the half telas, so many of the 2-hole beads would work for the sides. What I'm going to do is pick up one of my needles, and I'm going to add 6 of my 15-0s onto the needle. Once I have those 6 on, I'm letting them drop down next to my silky. And I'm going to pick up the other needle. In this case, it's my right needle. And I'm going to go back through those beads. And also at the same time, I'm going to come right out of those beads, give a nice tight pull, and make sure I have all of my beads in place. So here I have this perfect little strip of silky beads that's going to become my Silky Caterpillar. And if you wanted to, you could also stop at this point. It's a very pretty, cute, little fast bracelet that you could add ends to and have it completely finished right off the bat there. What we're going to do is make it sit up and kind of add that caterpillar form. What I'm going to be doing is adding my 11-0s and my infinity beads to the side here. We're going to be coming down and going back up right away on the infinities. This base line then we're going to create after that row. So I'm going to come down on the left side, and I'm also going to come down on the right side. As I come down on the sides, right now I'm just going to kind of put my left needle off to the side. I'm going to be working with my right needle. As I'm coming out of those 15 O's here, I'm going to pick up one of my 11 O's and my infinity. After that, I'm going to be adding the bottom section, which is 3 more 11 O's, and let that drop. In Anna's example, she did use 2 different colors. You don't really see it that much, so I'm not requesting basically that you have 2 colors available. Excuse me. Once I have that infinity and those 3 beads on, I'm going to come back up that same infinity so the beads just sit decorating the side. From there, I'm going to add another 11 O to top the infinity. So when you're looking at it, it's going to be the 11, the infinity, 3 11s, and then another 11. Coming back along the side then, what I'm going to be doing is picking up my middle beads. So I'm picking up my 15 O's and my 2mm beads after I add each infinity. So that needle then, after I have those on, is going to go back through the infinity, the 2mm, and the 15 O, the 2mm, and then the next 15 O. I'm going to continue to do this the whole length of the project, adding an 11, an infinity, 3 11s, pushing that down and going back up the infinity, doing a nice tight pull there, adding another 11 O on the side, and then sewing down the side here. I'm going to make sure before I go too much further that those beads are nice and tight and that I don't have much extra thread showing. And that's going to tighten up my side. So I'm going to do that here with the left side, or the right side, and I'm going to do the same thing with my left side here. So an 11 O goes on in an infinity, 3 11s, back up the infinity, an 11 O, and then once I have all of those down and on, I'm going to pick up that 15 to 15. And I usually always mention 11O or 8O rather than saying 8 or 11, because I do have a lot of new beginners that watch the videos. Also, a lot of times I'm using millimeter beads in addition to seed beads. So that's why I go ahead and usually say the whole 11O or 8O, because I may be using 8mm beads and I don't want to confuse people which I'm using. So I'm going to continue now the whole right side and left side, adding my infinities and kind of creating the legs there of my caterpillar as I'm working back. So I've gone down the whole line here and I'm ready to add my last of my infinity bead, and I'm going to do that and then show you where our needle is going to go before we add the bottom, pulling it all together. And when I'm at the end here, what I want to do is I'm going to have my needle come out the same place on each side. I'm going to go through the end 3 beads on the side of the Silky and give nice tight pulls. If you would want to, it kind of creates a little bit of a wave because the beads are a little bit bigger than we want them to be. That's why we're going to be pulling them downward and having that caterpillar sit up. But if you want to keep the legs of the caterpillar exposed, you can definitely do that and add a clasp at this point. If you were doing that, I would suggest using teardrops or something like that. You could also come along the side here and put in a 15 and a drop in a 15 to create a little bit more of a design. What we're going to be doing though is we're going to be seaming up the back. When I'm doing that, I'm going to be just working with my 11 OC beads. So everything else can go back into tubes, can get put away. I learned that if I don't do that while I'm working, it doesn't happen. So I'm going to be working right now, and I'm going to sew down sides and add my clasp. For my clasp, again, I'm using that light violet cup button, and then we're going to come back and kind of singe up the bottom. Again, just using the 11 O's. I am going to use one infinity bead here. I'm going to take one out, and I am going to use just a couple of my 15 O's, 3 of those, to decorate the clasp when I'm working on it. So get those all out and we'll get ready to put on your clasp. So adding my clasp, I'm just going to pick up my right or left needle, doesn't matter. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add 4 of my 11/0 seed beads and let those drop down next to my project. With the left needle, same thing, 4 11/0 seed beads and let those drop down. Once I have those on, I'm going to go through the back of my cup button. I'm going up the back with this left needle here. Once I'm at the top, I'm going to add my infinity bead. And then I'm going to add my 15 O's, and I'm adding 4 of those. Then I'm going to sew down the right hand side of that cup button and the infinity bead and pull my needle out. And that's going to decorate the top of that button right there. Just adds a little bit to the design. With the needle that's on the right hand side, I'm going to mimic that, going through and reinforcing the cup button. Whenever you have a clasp or closure, you always want to make sure you have at minimum 3 or 2 threads going through. If you want to, you can do a 3rd time through. Then I'm going to be coming out right after my cup button. Give a nice tight pull, and that gets my clasp closure in place. What I'm going to do now is actually connect to the base of the project. So we're going to be working here with the sides of our infinity beads. To work with them, I'm going to be adding 6 of my 11/0 seed beads onto each needle and sewing through all 3 of the 11/0 seed beads that are underneath the first infinity. And that's going to get that base strand started. On the other side, I'm going to do the same thing. Sewing through those first set on the left hand side of the 3 beads below the infinity. And that's going to be the start of my base strand here. I'm going to flip over the base, and if you're more comfortable again with 1 needle or 2 needle, that's kind of up to you. I'm going to be doing a right angle weave, but I'm going to be doing it with 2 needles because I have them. In the middle here, there are 3 11/0 seed beads, and then we're coming down the sides as well and adding a bead. So I'm coming out here at the base of the infinities, having gone through the 3 seed beads. I'm going to add 1 more on each side, which is going to pull it back together, and then 3 to go through the middle. So with my right needle, I'm going to add 1. With my left needle, I'm going to add 1. I'm going to let that drop down next to my project. And now I'm going to crisscross through 3 beads. So I'm adding 3 beads, going with my needle from right to left. And then I'm going to go through those same 3 beads with the left needle from left to right. Once I'm through there, making sure that you're on the base side so you can see I'm on the bottom. I don't have that little bubble or that little lip of the silkies. I'm going to pull my bead. And see, that's going to singe that up and pull that caterpillar up in place. On my right hand needle, I'm going to add 1 seed bead. Sew through the 3 at the base of the infinity. And then add another seed bead after. I'm going to do the same thing with my left hand needle. Add 1 bead. Sew through my next 3 beads at the base of the infinity. Add 1 bead, and then I'm going to crisscross through 3 of those beads. If you want to, you could add a different color. That's up to you. But I'm crisscrossing then through 3 from right to left and left to right. Once I'm through those 3, I give a pull, and you can see then those little right angle weave or that little circle occurring. What that is also doing as I flip over to the front is pulling that infinity bead to the side and having that caterpillar sit right up. So again, I'll do it one more time for you, and then we're going to continue on our own. One bead goes on through the 3 beads at the bottom of one of the infinities, or the half telos if you're using that. Another bead goes on, and then I do the same thing with the other needle. Bead on, through 3, bead on, and now I'm going to add 3 beads and cross through those. After I cross through 3 beads, I add 1 more bead and sew through my next infinity set. So I'm continuing with that pattern the whole length of the bracelet. Once I get to the end, I'll show you how we put on our loop to finish off our clasp. But I'm continuing doing that whole right angle weave section, and you want to pull after each little loop that you make. So I've gone through now and I've seamed up the entire back, and I'm coming out the ends here right after the 3 11 seed beads on that last infinity. I'm going to add my loop now, and I'm going to use 1 infinity to do so. This bracelet here has that awesome kind of caterpillar-y, warmish effect that you can move it back and forth, you can bend it one way, bend it the other way. So it's a really nice flexible design that Anna did here. What I'm going to be doing is actually adding 1 more infinity and creating the loop in order for my cup button to fit through. If you want to, you can also do peyote on the loop, that's up to you. But what I'm going to be doing is actually creating the loop and again adding kind of the infinity. This loop here is also going to connect the top to the bottom of the clasp, much like we did on the other side. So on each needle then I'm going to put 2 11 seed beads, and I'm going to go through 1 hole of an infinity bead. I'm going to do 2 on this side. I already have 1 on there. And then I'm going through that other hole of the infinity. So both needles are coming out in the same direction, and I've created just a little V there through the infinity. What I'm going to do now is pick up 26 11 seed beads to create my loop for my cup buttons to go through. Doesn't matter if you do this on the right or left. I would say this is a great opportunity to clean up your bead mat and kind of get some of those seed beads that have gone astray and further out of the pile. So that way when you use your lid or use a device to pick them up, you don't have as far to reach. So I'm going to get those 26 on there. Again, like I said, if you want, you can do a peyote loop. That's up to you. To start out, we're just doing a plain seed bead loop. And that loop then is going to come back and connect through my infinity. So I'm going to go back through the infinity and come out right after the infinity, not going back through any of those seed beads. And that's going to make that loop. With the other needle, I'm going to reinforce my loop going back through all of the seed beads that were added with the previous needle. And that's going to get 2 strands then going through my clasp. Again, I'm coming out right after the infinity. I'm going to give a pull at this point, making sure that I don't have any extra thread showing. Once I'm out the top here of the infinity, out the side closest to my beads, I'm going to add 2 beads, and I'm going to sew through my 15 O's through the 2 middle 15 O's that are decorating the side of the silky bead. That's going to pull that all together. On this other side here, I'm just going to let the needle hang out. I'm going to pick up 2 more of my 11 O's. So back through the infinity bead here. And we're going to sew back through the first of the 11 O's to do our peyote loop. That's going to join that bottom and top together and basically close up that hole between them. Again, the one needle is just hanging out at the side here. The needle that I'm coming out the first 11 with, I'm going to pick up another 11, skip 1, and go through the 3rd in line. and this is peyote stitch. If you're unfamiliar with peyote stitch, you can actually pause this video, look at another video, which is specifically designed to teach you peyote stitch, and then come back to this one. But it's basically you pick a bead, skip a bead, and go through the next. So you're always going through the odd count of beads. So I'm gonna skip over the even bead, so you're skipping over 2, 4, 6, etc., and sewing through the odd count and adding a bead at a time to get that peyote design. I'm going to continue the whole loop, adding those beads to get that peyote design. If you want to, you can also use some of your 15-0s to decorate up the sides. I'm going to continue doing this the whole way till my needle comes down right here at the base of my infinity. Once I'm through to that base there, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring my beads around, or my needle around. So I'm picking up my other needle just because it's here. I'm going to sew through those first 2 beads that I added. I'm going to add 3 more 11-0s. And I'm going to sew through the 2. So basically I'm creating that last little loop. I'm creating a little loop in there. Once I'm then to the side, I'm going to take off my needles and just tie my knot. Very simply. And I'm going to tie a square knot right over left and then left over right, or switch hands as I'm doing. That way I get that same effect without actually having to think about how I'm tying the knot. Once I have that tied there together, I'm going to take my super glue glue, do a dab of super glue there, let that dry a little bit. Then what I'm going to do is take my scissors, cut down my thread ends nice and short while it's still a little wet, or when it's dry, either way. I'm going to take my thread burner and just burn down on my edges. And that's going to get the end of that thread balled up there, so that way I don't have any extra appearing. Your glue then is going to dry, and your Silky Caterpillar bracelet is completed. So I have my bracelet, and the awesome thing is the shape that it holds. It's almost like a bangle, but because of the right angle weave on the bottom, it really is quite flexible, which a lot of times you don't achieve when you do have that bangle look to a bracelet. So I think this is an awesome design by Anna. You could really play up the different beads on the sides. You see them just a tiny little bit, and as they sit up in that caterpillar formation right there along the top of the silkies, it really became such an awesome design. I really like the infinities too on the sides. I think they add a lot. So that is the Silky Caterpillar bracelet. When you put it on, again, it does have that curvature to it, and you can just take it right through that seed bead loop then that we created. You have the nice cut button on the back. The buttons really allow you to get your bracelet on really, really quickly, so that's a reason that we love them. It sparkles just a tiny bit with those 2mm fire polished rounds, and you can have fun because you really only use half a tube of your infinities, you only use half a pack of your 2mm faceted rounds, so you can really play up and do this with a bunch of different designs. If you'd like to see more videos, you can always subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also visit us online at PotomacBeads.com, where we're happy to have links to all the different products for you. You can purchase there. You can also visit the locations page and the class page and view different class schedules for the different locations. If you can't get to one of the locations, you can also, like I said, purchase online. If you need links to the products that are used here in the video, you can drop down the description menu and to show more, and that'll give you links to all of these products like the silkies and the infinities and the 2mm rounds. Thanks a lot everyone for watching, and as always, have fun beading and creating Anna's design of this Silky Caterpillar.